Today we're going to be talking about the Afghanistan War.
It appears that there is more and more fire and smoke enveloping the very top of the building, and as fire crews are descending on this area, it does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God!
That looks like a second plane.
I didn't see a plane go in. That just exploded.
I just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. I was out up to
That's the second explosion. You can see the plane come in just from the right-hand side of the screen. So this looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center that is underway in downtown New York.
Did you hear the explosion from your position?
Yes, we did. As a matter of fact, we heard it, and because I was just like standing there pretty much looking out the window, I didn't see what caused it or if there was an impact.
So you have no idea what right
Oh, another one. Another plane just hit. Oh my gosh. Another plane has just hit. It hit another building. Right into the middle of it. Explosion. It's right in the middle of the building.
This one into the east tower.
Yes. Right in the middle of the building. And right now, that was definitely looked like it was on purpose.
So, the Afghanistan War was initially triggered by what you just saw, the attacks on New York City in 9/11. They attacked the two towers of the World Trade Center that you saw right there, and they also attacked the Pentagon, and there was a fourth plane that was hijacked that wasn't successful. It still killed lots of people, but it ended up crashing in a field somewhere in Pennsylvania. The U.S. leaders in 2001 during the attacks were George Bush. He was the president from 2001 to 2009. And then the U.S. Secretary of Defense was Donald Rumsfeld from 2001 to 2006. These three were the main leaders in Afghanistan at the time of the attacks. Rabbani was the president of Islamic State of Afghanistan. And Osama bin Laden, he was the leader of Al-Qaeda, which was the group that attacked, or did many terrorist attacks, not just 9/11. He was the mastermind behind it all. And he also was the mastermind behind attacks like the 2000 suicide bombing of the U.S. warship Cole. And he was killed on May 2nd, 2011 by the U.S. military. The Al-Qaeda group was formed in the late 1980s by Osama bin Laden. It was a militant Islamic organization that originally fought against the Soviet Union during the Afghan War. It eventually moved and reestablished its headquarters in Afghanistan in 1996, and it had the support of the Taliban. It had been linked to attacks in Jordan, Kenya, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Turkey, and the UK in the 6 years preceding 9/11. The next guy here is Mullah Muhammad Omar. He was the ultimate leader of the Taliban, which was the group that helped hide Osama bin Laden after the attacks. We don't really know much about him. This is really the only picture they have of him. He is missing an eye from one of the attacks during the Afghan War. But the main thing is that he helped hide Osama bin Laden and helped Al-Qaeda. The Taliban was what he led, and it was an ultra-conservative political and religious faction that ruled Afghanistan, and it helped Al-Qaeda when they moved to Afghanistan. They seized the capital of Afghanistan, which was Kabul, and gained control of the entire country. Taliban was not really approved of by most leaders around the world because of many social policies that they had. They kind of banned and excluded women from social life, like they couldn't get an education, they couldn't work. There were a lot of harsh criminal punishments, and the worst was that they allowed Afghanistan to be a safe haven for people like Osama bin Laden. What initially started the war in Afghanistan was that the Taliban and Mohammed Omar refused to hand over Osama bin Laden to the U.S. military, and it started a confrontation that initially started the whole entire war. 9/11 was, like I said, there were 4 jetliners that were taken over by people from Al-Qaeda. They crashed into the North and South Towers, and they crashed into the Pentagon, and another one that was unsuccessful. Almost 3,000 people died that day, including 19 people that were a part of terrorist groups. And shortly after, on September 20th, George Bush declared the war on terror. This was after the Taliban refused to hand over Osama bin Laden. George Bush sent the military over to infiltrate Afghanistan a month after 9/11, and they had 3 main missions. One was to destroy Al-Qaeda training camps, to bomb the Taliban military installations, and hunt down Osama bin Laden.
Okay, this is just a picture. The overview, Maddie kind of already gave an overview, but started in 2001, and it is actually still going on today, and it's kind of sad because there are like a lot of things, like events occur today in Afghanistan that we don't even hear about anymore. So the goals of the war were to dismantle Al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban from power. So the results and changes caused by the war, we have them here. So the Taliban was claimed to be defeated pretty soon after the attacks on 9/11. I actually have a quote from an article in the New York Times, and it was on December 11th, 2001, so just 3 months after. And it said, only 2 or 3 Taliban leaders have been captured by opposition forces in recent days, including the Taliban Army Chief of Staff, officials said today. And while some in the Osama bin Laden's hierarchy have been killed by bombs or missiles, not one has been captured in Afghanistan, and many are thought to remain in hiding. That includes Mr. bin Laden, whom the United States accuses of masterminding the September 11th terror attacks. So that was when they started to defeat everyone. Then the destruction of Al-Qaeda camps. So it's still a continued effort. There are lots of articles from the early 2000s about the destruction of Al-Qaeda camps. The Al-Qaeda camps were basically camps where people went to train and become a part of this group, obviously a terrorist group. So there's still a continued effort to destroy those camps. Next, the killing of Osama bin Laden. I have a video.
Osama bin Laden is dead, his body buried at sea. He was killed in Pakistan by US Special Forces. President Barack Obama made the announcement this morning saying justice has been done. The Al-Qaeda leader had been in hiding since masterminding the 9/11 attacks in 2001. We're live in Washington and New York this morning, where Americans have been gathering to celebrate the news.
This is Sky News with Eamon Holmes.
And that is the news you're waking up to. Osama bin Laden is dead. The Al-Qaeda leader, the man who masterminded the 9/11 attacks on New York and the Pentagon, was killed in a targeted operation by American forces in Pakistan overnight. His body was buried at sea in the early hours of this morning, just 2 hours ago. The operation took place late last night in Delhi time in a town called Abbottabad, about 60 miles from Islamabad. It's thought bin Laden had been living in a large villa in the town. President Obama, making the shock announcement, said no US service personnel had been harmed and that care had been taken to avoid civilian casualties. These are the pictures of the villa within a compound where bin Laden was hiding. It's believed he was staying in a 2-story house just 100 yards away from a Pakistani military academy. Pakistani media reporting his 2 wives and 6 children have been arrested.
also the return of over 5.7 million refugees from Pakistan and Iran. And then finally, the new Afghan government. So the new government in Afghanistan is still definitely a work in progress, but they're trying to kind of make it more like a democracy. So there have been, I think there was an election in 2004 for president, and they're trying to kind of model the governments of like those of the NATO, which is like North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Yeah.
So as teenagers, one of the things we don't realize is that the war is still going on now, and that one of the reasons it doesn't affect us very much is because the U.S. doesn't have a draft, so we don't have to worry about our siblings, like my 18-year-old brother, going into war and like missing college. I don't have to worry about that, so the war doesn't affect me as much. It just kind of seems like a distant news title to me. So why worry about a draft if we don't have one, if it isn't affecting young men? It still affects older people of older age. For example, they need nurses and doctors to help soldiers. And if we had more drafts, there would be more deaths and bloodier wars, which would be hard. So does resistance towards a draft help? And an article said it does because there's less people, so there'd be less bloodshed, and you could pull out of the country sooner. They have what's called a doctor draft, which is for older people to be doctors in the war, and they're people that are in the reserves, so they're either ready, retired, or they're selected. And then the deaths in Afghanistan are called for first, second, and maybe third extended deployments, which means that like, people can be kept getting pulled into the war. And there's a lot of controversy over the doctor draft because people are saying that it goes against the Hippocratic Oath, which is to preserve life, and a lot of people say that the doctors are just patching up the soldiers to go out and fight again. So what I did was I talked to some students at Worcester Academy. For example, Andronik is from Russia, and there is a Russian draft for kids 18 to 27 years old. And one thing that Andronik has to worry about is if he goes back home, if he gets drafted for the war or for the military. So in Russia, males are registered for draft at 17 years old, and their service obligation is 1 year, and it was just reduced from 1.5 years in 2008. And then they're required for 6 months of training before entering combat zone, and that they can be in the reserve until 50 years old.